All right, so let's go through number 2. In my last video, I made a bit of an error because I did not read the problem first, which is exactly what I would be telling you guys to do. So number 2, let's read it carefully this time. Find all excluded values for the expression. That is, find all values of x for which the expression is undefined. If there is more than one value, separate them with commas. Okay, so for this particular problem, where I should have started was with the denominator. Because, I don't know if you guys remember this from before we left remote, if your denominator is equal to 0, then you have an undefined expression. Okay, so for this particular problem, be very, very careful. Like you already saw me, the people who are watching have seen me make this error. So basically, you want to look for expression being undefined so that you realize I need to set the denominator equal to 0. And then whichever x values come out of there, those are the ones that I can't have, like the ones that would make my entire expression undefined. Okay. So let me go over here. We have x squared minus x minus 72. We're going to set that equal to 0 and solve for x. Whatever x values we get, we'll make the expression undefined. Okay, let me save that. Now, I know that this is hopping into solving a quadratic right now, which is probably not something super familiar to you right now. So what I'm going to start with is just the expression x squared minus x minus 72. Now, I'm going to go through this process again, but a little bit faster. For this, we're still going to need to use the AC method, so I'm not completely bummed about that last part. We're going to factor using AC method. If you're already familiar with factoring and you're comfortable with like the trial and error method, you could use that too, but I ideally don't like to teach that method unless you've already factored a lot before. So, okay, just to recap, essentially what we're trying to do, we're trying to match this form, ax squared plus bx plus c. Okay, so we have a, b, and c that we're trying to identify. And then once we do that, we're going to put a times c on the top and put b down below. So a is going to be 1. B, there's a negative in front of the x, so there's like an invisible 1 right here, right? So b is going to be negative 1. And then c will be negative 72. So a times c is negative 72, and b is negative 1. And then you have, for this AC part, remember you're looking for the numbers that multiply to negative 72 and the numbers that add to negative 1. So what we're going to do, we're going to start with the AC part. AC is negative 72. We only care about 72 positive right now. List the factors of 72, and you're going to find you don't need to list them all. 1 and 72, 2 and 36, so on and so forth. But 8 and 9, okay, I know that 8 times 9 gives me a positive 72. And then how can I add these numbers and get a negative 1 out? Well, if I add a negative 9 to a positive 8, I get a negative 1. Okay. Let me save that and clear the bottom. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to keep this x squared here. We're going to keep the ax squared part. Okay. So that's going to be x squared for our problem. We're also going to keep the negative 72. But we're going to split this middle term here. Okay. And the way that we split it, we're essentially, remember there's a negative 1 in front of the x here. We're splitting negative 1 into a positive 8 and a negative 9. And then we still keep the variable on the end so that they're like terms. Okay. Now, factoring by grouping, take your first group, find the GCF and factor it out. For the 1 in front and the 8, you get a GCF of 1. And for the x squared and the x, GCF x. So you can just write that as x. For the second group, you will have a GCF of negative 9 between the negative 9 and the negative 72. And then between x and 1, because you don't see any x's here, right? It would just be 1. So your GCF is just negative 9. So between these two first terms, factor out the x. And then what's left over, we have x squared. If we divide out an x, we're left with x. And then you have 8x divide x. That's positive 8. And then GCF for the second group, negative 9. And then what's left over, negative 9x divided by negative 9 gives you a positive x. Negative 72 divide negative 9 gives you a positive 8. You want these factors to match when you have done your grouping, okay? Because now they become the new GCF for this entire expression. Okay. Let me save this. And then I'm going to clear this screen out, not the entire thing. Write this up here first. Still getting adjusted to this writing device. Man, I'm not gonna lie. I'm sure you guys are experiencing this too in various ways. It is very difficult to work from home sometimes. There's so many distractions here. Uh, I've got babies and kitties, not my babies, and neighbors and all kind of other stuff happening right now. Okay, so from here, we're gonna factor out that GCF of x plus 8. And then the part that's left over, kind of think, if I took this whole term and divided it by the factor x plus 8, that would cancel from top to bottom. I'd be left with x. And I take this whole term and I divide out x plus 8, I'm left with -9. Okay. So we just went over factoring by grouping for a trinomial. Now, that was just the expression part over here, right? We still had this set equal to 0. So what I'm going to introduce now is what's called zero product property. And essentially what that's saying is this first factor, if I divided it out on both sides, well, 0 divided by x plus 8 or any other number aside from 0 is going to be 0. And then the x plus 8s would cancel on this side. I would have x minus 9 equals 0. Okay, let me freeze that. Okay. Or if I instead divided both sides by this second factor, x minus 9, come on. Then I would get a 0 on the right side, and x minus 9 would cancel top bottom on the left side. I'd be left with x plus 8. Let me put the or between. Okay. So essentially, what you're doing for the zero product property, you're just setting each of these individual factors equal to 0 and solving for x. So first bit, x equals 9, or second bit, x equals -8. So the values that we would be excluding, x equals -8 or 9. All right, let me save that. And then let me clear it out.